The billionaire Sheikh's footsteps echoed through the marble halls of his sprawling palace. But tonight, the familiar cold luxury felt suffocating. A gilded cage he had grown weary of. The invitation lay in his hand, a simple slip of paper edged with jasmine-scented ink, beckoning him to a place far from opulence, the modest home of his maid. An unusual impulse stirred inside him, a rare curiosity to glimpse the world beyond his golden walls. He told himself it was merely a fleeting whim, but the truth ran deeper, a hunger to confront something raw and real. Outside, the desert night swallowed the shimmering towers behind him. The city's glow faded, giving way to narrow alleys where shadows clung to mud-brick walls stained by time. The air was thick with the scent of earth and wood smoke, so different from the heady perfume of sandalwood and oud that always lingered in his chambers. He paused, feeling the coarse texture of the cracked earthen road beneath his polished leather shoes, a jarring reminder of the world he ruled but rarely touched. At the doorstep of the maid's simple dwelling, a humble wooden door stood in stark contrast to the palace gates he was used to commanding. She appeared silently, her dark eyes lowered, the faintest tremor betraying the calm veneer she maintained all day. Her hands, calloused yet delicate, wrapped nervously around a tray of steaming bread and fragrant tea. Her presence was a quiet defiance, a blend of vulnerability and unyielding dignity that intrigued him more than he cared to admit. "Welcome, Your Highness," she murmured, voice barely above the desert. Whisper, a courteous mask hiding untold depths. The Sheikh's gaze lingered a moment longer than protocol allowed, before he nodded curtly. "Thank you for inviting me." She hesitated, then with a courage born of necessity, she stepped aside, revealing the sparse interior. A modest courtyard bathed in the soft glow of lanterns, walls adorned with faded tapestries and potted herbs. This was a world stripped of excess, yet it breathed with life and warmth he hadn't realized he craved. As they settled, a charged silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. His eyes traced the lines of her face, subtle shadows under her eyes, the slight tightening of her jaw, and he sensed a story folded away beneath that calm exterior. "So why bring me here?" His voice was low, edged with a mix of command and curiosity. She met his gaze steadily, because even a sheikh can learn that control is an illusion. Her words fluttered like a defiant flame, stirring a ripple beneath his composed facade. He bristled, yet found himself leaning in, pulled by the gravity of something he could neither buy nor command. Their conversation wove through delicate threads of shared loneliness, veiled challenges, and cautious trust. Every glance, every pause spoke volumes, an unspoken dance of attraction and wariness. The air hummed with tension. Every heartbeat became a secret rhythm between them. Then, when the night seemed to cradle its fragile peace, the sheikh's eyes caught sight of a faded photograph pinned discreetly on the cracked plaster wall, a portrait of a young girl with eyes hauntingly familiar. His breath caught. That single image shattered his world of certainty. Before him lay not just a maid, but a story entwined with shadows of betrayal, sacrifice, and secrets powerful enough to unravel even his iron grasp on life. The revelation pressed like a storm on the horizon. What was hidden beneath her quiet strength threatened to erase the boundaries he had built for himself and unmask a vulnerability he had long buried. The night had only just begun, before the next secret of this desert world unfolds. Make sure you're part of our caravan of stories. Many fates are yet to be shaped, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave a like if the heart of this billionaire sheikh has already captivated you. Tell me in the comments, which city are you watching this saga from? And what twist do you think is coming next? Your passion for these dramas is what inspires us to continue. Thank you for being with us. The dim lantern light flickered against the faded tapestries, casting wavering shadows over the courtyard's cracked earth floor. The air was thick with secrets, yet the silence between them spoke louder than words. The sheikh's eyes remained fixed on the photograph, his breath lingering as if to catch the echoes of a forgotten past. Her gaze followed his, steady but unreadable. "You don't have to pretend ignorance," she said softly, voice barely a whisper. "That girl, she's why I'm here." A cold knot tightened in his chest. The quiet dignity she wore like armor made her revelation all the more piercing. The maid, the woman who stirred his curiosity that night, was tied to a history he had tried to bury beneath his empire's dazzling facade. He stepped closer, the scent of jasmine from the invitation still mingling faintly with the harshness of the desert night, seeping in through the open courtyard. "Why didn't you tell me before?" His voice cracked, the steel edge softened by a fragile thread of doubt. She met his gaze, unwavering. "Because some truths are weapons," she replied, "and in this world, some battles can't be fought openly, especially not by those dressed in silk and gold." Her words hammered against the walls of his mind. The Sheikh Billionaire, the man whose will bent kingdoms, felt suddenly powerless in the face of a quiet, ordinary woman whose past threatened to unravel him. The night deepened, the desert wind whispering through the open windows like a prescient warning. "Tell me everything," he commanded, though his voice betrayed the war within. "Every secret you've carried in silence." She poured the steaming tea, her hands steady, despite the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. "It began long before I became your maid," she started, eyes distant. "There was a family, torn apart by betrayal, by greed masked in friendship. That girl, my sister, she was stolen from me, taken into a world of shadows, lost beneath the weight of lies." The sheikh's heart pounded in rhythm with each syllable. The image in the photograph had morphed from a mere face into a living memory of pain and endurance. "Why tell me this now?" he pressed, fighting the impulse to retreat into the cold fortress of his palace. "Because you need to understand why I accepted your invitation, for reasons beyond duty or fear. I needed you to see beyond the walls you built." Her voice trembled. "To see me, not the maid, but the woman who has fought to reclaim what was stolen." He swallowed past the rising storm inside him. The opulence that once seemed invincible now felt like chains tightening with every breath. The sheik realized that power without understanding was a hollow throne. "I underestimated you," he admitted, And perhaps I underestimated what fate has in store for us both. His gaze softened, unraveling the stoic mask piece by piece. I don't promise I'll understand it all, but I promise to listen. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, not of weakness, but of resilience tested by years of silence. A fragile bridge formed between two worlds, one of grandeur, the other of survival. For the first time, the Sheikh felt the stirrings of something dangerous yet exhilarating. Hope. The courtyard seemed to breathe with them. The night no longer an expanse of solitude, but a stage for uneasy alliances and whispered confessions. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by a distant, hurried knock on the wooden door. Both turned, tension stiffening the air between them. The maid's gaze flickered with uncertainty. Before she could speak, the Sheikh stepped forward, his voice a low command. "Who's there?" The knocking resumed, more insistent, desperate almost. She swallowed hard and exchanged a look with him, a silent question hanging in the charged air. He motioned for her to open the door. As the heavy wood creaked, a figure stumbled into the flickering lantern light. The moon illuminated a face marked by fear and exhaustion. A messenger, clutching a folded parchment stained with sand and sweat. The Sheikh's eyes narrowed, sensing the weight of news that could shatter fragile trusts. With trembling hands, the messenger broke the seal and held the parchment out. The Sheikh unfolded it slowly, the words within igniting a storm of dread and urgency. Her breath caught when she saw the emblem embossed in crimson, a symbol tied not only to her past, but to enemies long believed vanquished. "It's happening," the Sheikh whispered, voice thick with a mixture of fear and resolve. The night air seemed to contract, every shadow of the courtyard stretching ominously. She stepped beside him, defiance flashing in her dark eyes. "Then we must be ready, together." And in that charged moment, beneath the stars that witnessed empires rise and fall, the fragile alliance between the Sheikh Billionario and the Maid was no longer a secret whispered in shadows. It was a bond forged in the face of an unstoppable storm. But as the first light of dawn prepared to break, a new danger cast its long shadow. Footsteps approaching the courtyard from the alley, slow and deliberate, bearing the weight of a threat that would test them both in ways unimaginable. The door trembled with each knock, and the Sheikh's heart clenched, because those who seek to destroy never announce their arrival. The knocking persisted, each rap on the heavy wooden door reverberating through the small courtyard like a heart pounding in desperation. The Sheikh's gaze snapped to the entrance, his jaw tightening as years of command demanded he face this threat unflinchingly. But beneath the surface, a flicker of uncertainty had taken root. This was no ordinary visitor. The maid's hands trembled as she stepped back, her dark eyes searching his for the strength she needed to summon. He nodded once, sharp and certain, a silent vow to shield her from whatever storm was coming. Together, they moved toward the door, the flickering lanterns casting shadows that danced around their entwined silhouettes. The door creaked open to reveal a man swathed in dust and sweat, his face etched with the exhaustion of a journey forced and fearful. His eyes darted nervously between the Sheikh and the maid, clutching a parchment sealed with a crimson burning in their hearts. "Your Highness," the man gasped, struggling to find breath in the thick desert night. "The council's spies have confirmed. The Hawari clan is mobilizing. They've broken the truce." A cold chill swept over the courtyard, biting through the layers of lavish robes and fragile hopes alike. The Hawari clan. The name alone carried the weight of dark legend. Whispered warnings passed over generations. Enemies thought long subdued, now threatening the fragile peace that the Sheikh's empire had painstakingly built. The maid stepped closer, voice steady but fierce. "They're coming for more than power. They want what was taken from us, what was stolen." The Sheikh's eyes narrowed, the heavy burden of legacy mingling with the unpredictable tide of emotion swelling inside him. Here, away from the gallant halls of his palace, stripped of the usual veneer of control, he felt the raw edges of fear and resolve twist inside his chest. "Gather the guards," he ordered, voice unleashing the steel beneath his cultured tones. "Prepare the servants to relocate. No one is to be left unprotected." The man nodded quickly, vanishing into the night like a shadow swallowed by the desert's breath. The courtyard was plunged back into silence, thick and suffocating, as the gravity of the moment settled like dust over the stone walls. The maid lowered the tray she had been clutching, the delicate porcelain trembling in her grasp. "This changes everything," she said quietly, meeting his eyes. "The past I tried to bury is riding in on the backs of soldiers. They want to erase us." The Sheikh reached out, his large hand brushing against hers for a fraction of a second, a gesture charged with unexpected warmth and solidarity. "I will not let that happen, not while I breathe." Her breath caught at the sincerity laced beneath his commanding words. The Sheikh Billionario was more than a ruler. Beneath gold and power, he was a man desperate to protect something precious, something more fragile than the thrones he had crushed beneath his will. The lantern flickered again, threatening to waver out, but the sudden surge of determination between them burned brighter than any flame. They weren't merely Sheikh and Maid now. They were allies, born of shattered pasts and a future forged in the fire of rebellion. "Tell me everything you know," he demanded softly. "No more secrets." Her gaze dropped momentarily before sharpening, with resolve. The truce was a lie. The Hawari never intended peace. They hide in the shadows, mercenaries, spies, faces loyal only to bloodlust. They've waited for years, and now they are coming to reclaim what they lost. A sudden breeze whipped through the courtyard, stirring the faded tapestries on the walls. The scent of jasmine from the invitation still clung faintly to the air, a beautiful reminder of the night their worlds collided. He pulled his cloak tighter against the cool desert wind, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the crumbling walls. The palace lights glimmered faintly, a fragile stain of opulence against the encroaching dark. "Then we must be ready," he said, voice a low vow. "Tonight everything changes." For a moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath. She stepped close, her presence steady and unflinching, despite the storm gathering at their doorstep. "We need allies," she whispered. "There are those among the merchants, the old guards, even within your court who despise the Hawari as much as we do. The Sheikh's face, sculpted by years of command in battle, softened as he studied her. Trust will be our greatest weapon and our greatest risk. Her lips curled in a faint, knowing smile. Risk is a luxury we cannot afford. Fear is the only thing we share. As the night deepened, shadows stretched longer and fell heavier, swallowing the corners where danger waited silently. The invitation scent mingled with the dry breeze, a haunting reminder that the palace walls offered no sanctuary, not tonight. A sudden noise pooled from the alley, a soft but deliberate shuffle. Both turned, sharply, instincts honed by years of vigilance, flaring perfectly timed. The door rattled under another determined knock, slower this time, deliberate and menacing. The Sheikh's hand fell to the ornate dagger at his belt. His eyes blazed with all the fury of a man who had watched empires fall and loved ones vanish. The moment crackled with the promise of violence and betrayal. "Open it," he whispered, voice barely audible but commanding. Piece by piece, the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind the shadowy figure, like a thunderclap in the quiet courtyard. The flickering lantern light cast anxious shadows over the faces of the Sheikh and the maid, their breaths shallow, hearts pounding in unison as the weight of the messenger's news settled between them like a thick desert storm. "The Hawari clan," the Sheikh whispered, voice rough and low. "Old enemies bearing old grudges. Their hatred hasn't withered with time. It has only grown sharper." The maid's eyes flashed with determination. "They seek what was stolen, what was buried beneath lies and blood. Not just power, but the very truth that could destroy us all." For a moment, the desert's stillness pressed against their skin, the silence punctuated only by the distant howl of a lone wolf. The grandeur of the Sheikh's sprawling palace seemed miles away, replaced by the fragile intimacy of this modest courtyard where fate had drawn two unwilling allies. His hand brushed against the rough stone wall, grounding him even as the storm of emotions roared inside. Beneath the mask of the unyielding ruler, he felt a stirring he hadn't known possible, fear tangled with fierce protectiveness. "We will not be caught unprepared," he vowed, the steel in his voice breaking through the desert's oppressive hush. "Send for the elite guards. Seal the palace gates. Every shadow must be watched." The maid nodded, her fingers tightening around the edge of the tray she had set aside. "And the merchants, the ones who sway the balance of power, they can't be trusted. Some will aid us, others will betray for coins long buried." Her gaze flicked toward the distant city lights, where golden towers loomed like silent witnesses to secrets best kept. A sudden gust swept through the courtyard, stirring the lantern flames into a wild dance of light and shadow. The scent of jasmine from the invitation lingered faintly, a ghost of the night when curiosity crossed the line into danger. The Sheikh closed his eyes briefly, then met her unwavering gaze. "This is not just about revenge or reclaiming losses. It's about survival, ours, together." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we must be ruthless. The past taught me that mercy is a luxury reserved for fools." A dry crack echoed nearby as a tile shifted beneath their feet. a small but sharp reminder of the fragility underlying their fragile bond. The years of silence and secrets that the maid had carried suddenly felt like an invisible weight crushing the desert air. "Tell me," he said quietly, "everything about your family, the Hawari's betrayal. I must understand, to fight with you and not against you." She swallowed the tremor that threatened to break her composure. The maddening ache of old wounds opened like a desert flower at midnight. "My father trusted too easily, believing alliances forged with blood were unbreakable, but the Hawari poisoned those bonds with lies. They took my sister, my blood, dragged her into the darkness where even my voice cannot reach." The Sheikh's jaw clenched, the pain she spoke of a mirror to the losses he'd buried beneath piles of riches and command. "And you believe that she is alive," she said, eyes burning with a desperate hope. "Somewhere in the shadows of their domain." He stepped closer, the scent of oud and jasmine mixing in the cool night air. "If she lives, I swear no stone will be left unturned to find her." The quiet between them grew heavy with unspoken words, the weight of shared pain forging a new understanding, stronger than any royal decree. The line between master and servant blurred, replaced by a fragile alliance bonded by wounds and a hunger for justice. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the moment, the unmistakable clatter of metal against stone. Both spun toward the courtyard entrance, where a shadow detached itself from the darkness with predatory grace. A figure emerged, cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a hood that swallowed any trace of humanity. The stranger moved with lethal precision, each step a threat carved into the night. The mansion's silence snapped like brittle glass. The Sheikh's hand instinctively clenched around the hilt of his dagger, eyes narrowing with lethal focus. "Who dares come unannounced?" His voice was a growl, a command and a warning carried on the desert wind. No answer came, but a slow, mocking chuckle that spiraled out of the shadows, chilling despite the desert's simmering heat. The maid's breath hitched, fingers trembling as she edged closer to the Sheikh, not out of fear, but solidarity. "They want to test us," she whispered with fierce certainty. The cloaked figure stepped into the lantern's glow. A face emerged, scarred, cold as the steel glinting in his hand. A mercenary known to the palace informants as a harbinger of doom. The Sheikh's eyes burned with fury. "You bring threats from the shadows, but this palace is my fortress." The mercenary's smile was a slash of darkness. "Then you'd better be ready. The Hawari send their regards." Suddenly, from the alleys beyond, faint noises stirred. Voices, the shuffle of feet, the clink of weapons. The attack was no longer whispered in threat. It was a promise, fast approaching. The maid's fingers found the Sheikh's hand, a grip both trembling and resolute. "This is only the beginning." His gaze flicked toward the wall, where the tapestry caught the lantern light. Worn and frail, yet holding stories older than the desert itself. The empire he ruled, the secrets he harbored, and the woman who had unraveled his iron will stood on the cusp of chaos. And as the night's first scream pierced the still air, the Sheikh knew one truth with chilling clarity. The shadows within the palace walls were no longer his to command. They had a life of their own, one that would consume everything he believed invincible. The door behind them rattled violently, threatening to burst open. And in the depths of that looming nightmare, the Sheikh's heart cracked, not with fear, but with a desperate resolve to protect what he loved, even if it meant losing himself completely. The night air thickened with tension as the door slammed shut, leaving the courtyard cloaked in uneasy silence. The flickering lanterns cast long, restless shadows over their faces. The Sheikh Billionaire's grip tightened around the hilt of his dagger, fingers white with resolve, yet his eyes betrayed a storm of unspoken fears. Beside him the maid stood poised, the fragile porcelain tray forgotten at her feet. Her dark eyes, sharp and resilient, never left the cloaked mercenary who now loomed in the dim light like a shadow birthed from nightmares. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the steel in it cut through the quiet. They test our defenses. They want to see how easily fear breaks us. The mercenary took a step forward, the faint glint of a blade catching the lantern's fire. His lips curled into a cruel smirk, a promise of the violence he represented. Your palace is gilded, but even the brightest gold tarnishes when faced with fire, and the Hawari's flames will consume it all. The Sheikh's eyes flashed with a mix of contempt and cold calculation. Fire can be controlled or extinguished. Tell your masters that I am no man to be intimidated. The mercenary's laughter rippled through the courtyard like a venomous hiss before he vanished back into the alleys, swallowed by shadows as swiftly as he'd appeared. A tense silence followed, the kind that presses on the chest like desert heat. The maid's gaze softened as she reached for the Sheikh's hand, a rare vulnerability slipping through her carefully maintained armor. This is no longer your fight alone, she said quietly. Our paths have entwined, whether you accept it or not. He looked down at their linked hands, a jarring warmth in the midst of cold threats. Perhaps, he admitted with a heavy sigh, it was never meant to be any other way. Their breaths mingled in the charged space between them, a fragile truce forged in the crucible of shared peril. The vast palace and its sparkling halls felt a world away, irrelevant before the gathering storm. The heavy wooden door behind them trembled once more, the knocking now relentless, urgent. The Sheikh's jaw clenched in silent command, determination hardening his features. Prepare yourselves, he said, voice steady but low. Tonight, the very foundations of this empire will be tested. As servants scrambled to ready the defenders, whispers of the Hawari's betrayal and coming assault twisted through the palace corridors like poisoned wind. The betrayal cut deep, a wound festering beneath layers of wealth and power. The maid pulled a worn cloth over the tray, her eyes locked on the distant horizon, where darkness coiled like a living beast. The Hawari have waited in the shadows for years, growing stronger with every silence we kept. Now they strike. He paced the courtyard floor, the rough stone grounding him, even as his mind raced through strategies and alliances. The old guards, the merchants playing double games, the spies woven into his own court. They were all threads in a deadly tapestry. A sudden breeze stirred, carrying hints of jasmine and ancient dust. The Sheikh's gaze lifted to the moonlit sky, a silent vow etched on his brow. If they want war, they will have it, and I will burn with them if that is what it takes. She stepped closer, her presence a steady anchor amid his tempest. And what of those we trust? How many will stand with us? How many will sell us for gold or silence? He paused, eyes meeting hers with a raw honesty rarely granted. Trust is a luxury in this game, he admitted, but it is the only weapon left to us in this battlefield of shadows. The lantern light flickered violently, threatening to cut through the fragile peace they'd built. The air itself seemed charged, every nerve ending alive with anticipation and dread. Suddenly, a distant horn echoed, a low, guttural sound rolling across the desert dunes like a warning cry. The maid's breath caught, fingers tightening around the Sheikh's hand. They're moving faster than we thought. A harsh wind kicked up sand and dust, swirling around the courtyard. The tapestries fluttered, their faded patterns blurring into fierce shapes. Signs of a past stirring to life again. He looked past the walls, toward the approaching silhouette of armed men dark against the dawn's first faint glow. His voice dropped, thick with grim resolve. This night, our secrets, our scars, will either be buried or burned away in the fire to come. She met his gaze, unwavering. And whatever the cost, we will face it together. The pounding on the door changed, no longer a fearful plea, now a hammering force, as if the enemy sought not just entry, but dominance. The Sheikh's hand slid from hers to grasp the heavy dagger, the weight cold and familiar, a last defense against the gathering chaos. His heart thudded, a relentless rhythm of fear, anger, and something impossibly fierce, hope. The courtyard held its breath as the door shook violently, the threshold ready to give way to the inevitable storm. And then, in the agonizing silence before the breach, the Sheikh's voice cut through, low and sharp as desert steel. Whatever comes through that door, we stand unbroken. The knock stopped. A chilling quiet settled, before a whisper of footsteps slipped past the shattered threshold, and the darkness swallowed a single, unguarded gasp. The heavy wooden door groaned under the force of the final blows, rattling violently as metal threatened to splinter its worn frame. The courtyard, once a fragile sanctuary bathed in flickering lantern light, now trembled with impending chaos. The Sheikh Billionaire's grip tightened fiercely around the hilt of his ornate dagger, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. A tempest contained beneath calm, as the air thickened with the scent of jasmine and dust. Beside him, the maid's fingers clenched lightly around his arm, the tremor in her touch betraying the storm that swirled behind her stoic facade. Her eyes, steady and defiant, locked with his, silently vowing that they would face this darkness not as master and servant, but as allies bound by blood and secrets. From the shadows beyond the door, faint whispers slipped in, voices laced with menace and urgency. The sound of heavy boots pacing grew louder, a steady cadence that marched with the inevitability of approaching doom. The courtyard's worn stones seemed to hold their breath, the flickering lanterns casting grotesque, dancing statues upon the cracked walls. The Sheikh's gaze shifted toward the distant glitter of his palace beyond, its opulent spires bathed in cold moonlight, a stark contrast to the raw vulnerability of this modest courtyard. For a moment, he allowed himself to remember the life inside those walls, endless banquets, silk drapes that whispered secrets, whispers of power spoken in gilded halls. But tonight, that grandeur felt hollow, suffocating. Here, stripped of luxury and pretense, every heartbeat carried the weight of something raw and real. A soft sound, a deliberate, cautious tap, caught his attention. A figure emerged at the edge of the courtyard, cloaked in shadows, moving swiftly, but with purpose. Though the hood concealed most of the face, the sharpness of the eyes caught the lantern glow. Filled with urgency and fear. "It's Malik," the maid whispered, barely audible. The Sheikh's eyes narrowed. Malik was one of his most trusted, if reckless, scouts, known for slipping behind enemy lines and returning with whispers that could unravel entire empires. Malik crouched beside the door, voice low and "Arid, they're here. More than a scouting party. The Hawari don't just want to challenge you. They aim to seize everything by dawn." The Sheikh's jaw clenched, the fierce calm in his voice belying the fire roaring inside. "How many?" "Too many to face openly. They've hidden weapons in the alleys, set traps along the routes." Malik's gaze flicked toward the maid, a ghost of worry passing through his tired eyes. "If you wish to protect this place, or her, you'll need allies beyond the palace guard." The maid's lips pressed into a tense line, the weight of betrayal and hope melding into a fierce determination. "Then we will gather what remains loyal." Without hesitation, the Sheikh stepped forward, his cloak swirling like a dark wave. His voice, low and resonant, carried every ounce of command. He wielded. "Send out the messengers. Call the old guards, the merchants who have not yet sold their souls. This night we fight not just for land or legacy, but for the truth buried beneath all of it." The courtyard air rippled with unspoken promises. The maid, drawing breath against the mounting tide of fear, met his gaze. "And what of the sister?" The words hung between them like a fragile thread. The Sheikh's eyes darkened, revealing a depth of pain few had ever glimpsed. "If she lives, no matter how deeply hidden, I swear she will be found." For a long moment, their faces reflected the same escape. Suddenly, from the alley beyond the courtyard's walls, a distant explosion shattered the night, a sharp roar that echoed through the city's sleeping veins. Dust and sand swirled violently as a torch ignited a small blaze near the outskirts, a wild flare against the desert's darkness. The maid gasped, eyes wide. "They've begun." The Sheikh's heart pounded, a brutal drumbeat that matched the chaos unfolding outside. He moved closer to the maid, their breaths mingling in the cool desert night. His voice was a rough whisper, threaded with something more tender than the steel of command. "We may have wealth and power, but tomorrow it will be our courage and loyalty that define us." Her hand found his, fingers curling around his palm like a lifeline against the storm. The simple touch belied the complex dance of trust and fear that had taken root. Then let the desert witness a sheik and a maid standing as one. A sudden crash tore through the moment. The heavy door splintered and burst inward under sheer force. Figures spilled into the courtyard, faces grim beneath hoods, weapons raised like the hands of fate itself. The sheik stepped back, dagger gleaming beneath the lantern fire. His eyes burned with unwavering defiance. "Attack all you want," he growled, "but you will not break what we have built." The first shadow lunged, fast, furious, but the night exploded into a clash of steel and fury. The maid darted beside the sheik, her movements sharp and unyielding, a warrior shaped by pain and fire. Amid the chaos, a figure slipped toward the fading tapestry on the wall, reaching out with gloved hands to reveal a hidden carving beneath. A map, ancient and worn, marked with symbols that spoke of lost empires and buried truths. The sheik's eyes caught the movement, a sudden realization igniting like desert lightning. The battle was not only for their lives, but for a secret that could remake kingdoms. A scream tore through the courtyard, a warning, a prayer, a threat. The maid's voice reached him over the tumult, laced with desperate clarity. "They're after more than power. They want everything we're hiding." The sheik's heart cracked wide open, not with fear, but with a fierce promise. No matter the cost, no matter the darkness waiting beyond this night, he would face it all. Because some secrets, once unearthed, demanded a reckoning that could change even a chic billionaire's destiny forever of survival and rage. Every breath she took wove defiance into the heavy night, challenging those who dared trespass into their fragile realm. But even amid the chaos, the sheik's eyes never left the faded tapestry on the wall, now rent by bruised fingers seeking secrets long buried. A hidden map whispered promises of power and vengeance, a cruel echo of the battles waging before them. "Hold the line!" His voice was a low roar, commanding yet tinged with desperation. The courtyard shuddered under the weight of clashing wills. The intruders pressed forward, relentless and fueled by a hunger that went far beyond conquest. This was a reckoning rooted deep in betrayal and blood. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shattered the fragile trench of battle. Flames licked the edges of the courtyard walls as smoke curled into the moonlit sky, casting twisted shadows that seemed to writhe and mock. A mercenary lunged at the maid from the side, his blade aimed to finish what the flames could not. Time slowed. The sheik's dagger intercepted in a shower of sparks. His hand gripped hers as their eyes met, pain and determination burning fiercely in unison. Neither was alone. "Faster!" the sheik snapped, pushing forward through the black tide. Their combined strength, a symphony of fierce hearts and iron wills, began to turn the tide. But the battle was far from over. Every defender bore the weight of legacy and vengeance, every swing a desperate bid to protect all they held dear. Once the courtyard stood silent, but for ragged breaths and the hiss of dying embers. The Sheikh and his unlikely ally sank to the cracked stone floor. The air, thick with smoke and dust, mingled with the lingering scent of jasmine from the night's invitation, a cruel reminder of how far from peace they had fallen. The maid's hand found his again, trembling yet unyielding. "They wanted to break us," she whispered through cracked lips, "but we have become something they cannot destroy." The Sheikh's gaze softened, veiling the tempest within. "And they will cost us more than we imagined." A battered figure staggered through the smoke, clutching a blood-stained horn, etched with the same crimson emblem, the mark of the Hawari. Fear flickered in his eyes as he fell before the Sheikh. "They've taken the rear gate," the scout gasped. "A column approaches, more than we expected. They know every secret path." The courtyard seemed to constrict around them. The night's ferocity had only just begun. The Sheikh rose slowly, every step measured beneath the heavy cloak that billowed around him like the desert storm gathering beyond their walls. "Summon the loyalists. Close every passage. We cannot afford another breach." He turned to the maid, the woman who had unraveled his pride, awakened his doubts, and now stood as his fiercest ally. Her face was streaked with soot, her eyes fierce with the fire of hard-won trust. "We stand on the edge of oblivion," he murmured, voice laced with steel and something softer, almost fragility. "But we stand together." Her lips quivered for a heartbeat before she nodded, a fierce smile breaking through exhaustion and fear. "Together, then." The distant wail of horns echoed through the night like a dirge. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the desert held its breath in anticipation of the coming storm. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed, soft, precise, and a quiet shadow slipped through the scattered defenders. The Sheikh's gaze caught the movement. A figure, cloaked and hooded, emerging from the ruins like a ghost. His voice dropped to a bare whisper, rough as sand. "We are betrayed from within." The maid's breath hitched. "Who?" Before he could answer, a chilling laugh cut through the night air, a sound devoid of humor, filled only with malice and promises of ruin. From the darkness, a familiar and unwelcome presence stepped forward. The Sheikh's most trusted advisor, eyes gleaming with a secret blade of betrayal. The courtyard went deathly silent, the flickering lanterns casting long shadows over a new and deadly truth. The war was not only against an ancient enemy, but against those they once called family. The Sheikh's heart clenched as cold realization sank deep. The betrayal came not from the shadows outside, but from within the gilded walls that had once defined his empire. And with that, the night shattered once more, leaving only one certainty. The Sheikh's greatest battle had only just begun. The courtyard was a battlefield of shadows and whispers. The flickering lanterns, trembling as if sensing the fragile balance about to shatter. The Sheikh Billionaire's grip on the dagger was ironclad, yet beneath his composed exterior, a tempest raged. Each breath felt like a battleground between duty and a growing, unspoken vulnerability. The maid stood close, the roughness of her hands still echoing from chores, yet now clasping his arm with the steady strength that belied her delicate frame. Their eyes met, a silent communion forged in fire and fear. This alliance, born of secrets and desperation, had crossed the boundaries of power and position. The night thickened with expectation. Outside the courtyard, distant voices slithered through the alleys, footsteps aligned with malice, whispers of a war long sown. The silhouette of the mercenary who had threatened their peace lingered in the shadows, a grim reminder that danger was no longer a rumor, but an approaching storm. Without a word, the sheikh motioned for the maid to follow as he stepped across the courtyard, his polished boots echoing on cracked stone. The faded tapestry, torn and stained, pulled his gaze once more, a map of ancient borders and forgotten betrayals hidden beneath its surface. Fingers traced the worn edges, memorizing the symbols that promised either salvation or ruin. "We cannot hold the night alone," he murmured, voice low, but carrying the weight of command. "Old allies must be summoned, and new ones found in the dust and whispers of this city." She nodded, the fire in her eyes now ablaze with a fierce purpose. "I will reach out to those who remain loyal, the merchants who owe no debt to the Hawari, the servants who still believe in justice." But time is a cruel enemy. A sudden shift in the wind carried the scent of burning, smoke curling with the jasmine from his invitation. A cruel mingling of beauty and destruction. The distant crackle of flames hinted that the Hawari's assault had begun at the city's edge. His jaw clenched. "Prepare the palace. Every corridor must become a trap, every shadow a soldier." Their feet quickened pace as they moved toward the inner sanctum. The air between them pulsed with unspoken tension, fragments of their shared past, the fragile trust blooming amidst a siege of fear. "Why did you hide this from me?" His voice broke the silence, softer now, almost a confession. "Why the secrecy about your sister and this threat that has haunted us?" Her gaze faltered for a heartbeat, emotions flickering behind her guarded eyes. "Because I feared what your world would do to it. The power you wield is both a shield and a cage." His hand reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her brow, the gesture tentative, but charged with new tenderness. "No cage should blind me to your pain or the shadows that follow you." She swallowed, the walls around her trembling under his gaze. "I wanted you to see me, not just the maid, but the woman who has carried this burden in silence." The promise of dawn crept slowly across the dusty horizon, but neither dared retreat from the darkness now engulfing them. Suddenly, a harsh rattle shattered the moment. The massive door shuddered under relentless assault. Splinters flying like shards of brittle hope, the first wave had come. The sheikh's eyes narrowed, steeling with the resolve of a man who had never known surrender. "Stand beside me, not as a servant, but as my equal." She nodded, without hesitation, stepping into the circle of impending violence. The clash of steel erupted, a brutal symphony of desperation, honor, and survival. Amid the chaos, his gaze caught movement near the tapestry once more. Another figure bent low, fingers unraveling ancient secrets beneath the dust. The map's bare outlines became a beacon in the crumbling night, hinting at a destiny far beyond the siege. A piercing scream rose, a signal or a curse, and the courtyard spiraled into dark confusion. The merchant houses, the old guards, whispers of betrayal from within, and a sister lost to shadow, all braided into a weapon sharper than any blade. Through the carnage, the sheik caught the maid's eye, their breath ragged, but spirits intertwined. "This war is no longer for thrones or gold," he growled. "It's for our souls, and the truth hidden beneath the desert sands." Her grip tightened, a silent vow. "Passing like a flame between them. Then fight as if we are the last light in a dark world." The battle surged, every heartbeat a drum of defiance. And when the dust settled, the first cold light of dawn revealed not victory, but a fracture deeper than the scars worn on their bodies. A shadow detached itself from the wreckage, their greatest fear reborn in flesh. The traitor who had whispered lies under the guise of loyalty now stood bared, eyes glittering with cruel satisfaction. The sheik's breath stilled. "No," he breathed, the single word heavier than 1,000 swords. The dawn broke through the bloodied sky, and with it, an impossible choice loomed, one that would demand the ultimate sacrifice of trust, love, and power. The very soul of the Sheikh Billionaire hung in the balance. The first light of dawn stretched tentatively across the desert horizon, casting a gentle glow over the battered courtyard where the battle had raged through the night. The air was thick with ash and sweat, but amidst the ruin there was a stillness that spoke of hard-won peace. The Sheikh Billionaire stood tall, his cloak dusted and his gaze steady as he surveyed the quiet aftermath. Beside him, the maid, no longer merely a servant, stood with a quiet strength that matched his own. Their hands found each other instinctively, fingers intertwining as if sealing an unspoken vow forged in fire and blood. The treacheries of the past weeks hung heavily between them, betrayals, secrets, and echoes of old wounds. Yet now, those shadows seemed to fall away beneath the soft light of a new day. He turned to her, his eyes, once cold and commanding, softened by the weight of what they had endured together. "We have faced ghosts, not just from without, but from within. And yet, here we stand." A faint smile touched her lips, fragile but real. "Because we chose to stand together, not as master and maid, but as equals." The destruction around them was a harsh reminder of what they had lost. The crumbling gates, the scorched walls, but also of what they had saved. Their alliance had unraveled conspiracies, exposed treacheries hidden deep within his court, and shattered the Hawari's ambitions for dominion. He released a slow breath, the tension easing from his shoulders for the first time in what felt like years. "Your courage taught me more than any throne or empire ever could. Without you, I would have been lost in my own fortress." Her eyes held a glimmer of something fierce and tender all at once. "And your strength gave me hope, that no matter our past, we could build something better." Together, they walked slowly toward the center of the courtyard, where survivors, loyal guards, faithful servants, even some merchants who defied the corrupt, began to gather. Whispers of the night's trials rippled through the crowd, but in their midst was a new energy, one of unity and renewal. The sheik raised a hand, calling silence. His voice, still commanding, but now layered with humility, carried across the still air. Tonight we were tested, not just by enemies who sought to take from us, but by the betrayals that fester. In silence, we have paid a price, but we have also reclaimed our honor. Heads nodded, faces marked by exhaustion but lit with determination. The maid stepped forward beside him, her presence undeniable, a partner forged in battle and bound by trust. "This," she said clearly, "is the beginning of a new era, one where our voices unite, where justice is not whispered in fear, but spoken boldly." He looked at her, pride swelling in his chest, not for the power he wielded, but for the battle he wages, but for the woman who had stood by him, fierce and unyielding. The fragile wounds of old grievances felt softened now, healed with forgiveness and understanding. There was one final matter no longer to be ignored: the sister, lost in the shadows of deceit and war. The maid's gaze met the Sheikh's, the silent question of hope reflected in her eyes. He nodded, voice resolute. "She will be found. No secret is too deep, no darkness too dense. I swear it." Her hands tightened around his, the bond between them sealing a promise stronger than any pact. The sun now broke fully over the emirate, bathing the palace's jagged silhouette in warm light, transforming the scene from ruin to a symbol of rebirth. The desert wind carried scents of jasmine and cedar, mingling with the laughter of children who had begun to emerge from hiding, signaling life's fragile return. The sheik and the maid, now companions, bound not by titles or duty, but by shared scars and newfound love, stood together beneath the open sky, the weight of past sorrows finally lifting. The grand halls of the palace awaited restoration. But more importantly, hearts long closed to hope began to open. The empire was no longer just a realm of riches and power. It was a home reborn, on the foundation of trust, redemption, and unwavering devotion. They moved forward, side by side, footsteps echoing with certainty and peace. In the harmony of that morning light, the Sheikh Billionaire had not only reclaimed his dominion, but found something far greater: a love that conquered shadows and a future bathed in promise. And amidst the soft desert breeze, their story, once defined by silence and sorrow, now blossomed into a legacy of hope and belonging, an eternal testament to the power of forgiveness and the unbreakable bond between two souls who dared to stand united against the desert's unforgiving night.